Have you ever thought that a supermarket, a place where people usually go to shop, could turn into a haunting place you would never expect? A place that seems peaceful, yet hides terrifying darkness and secrets no one dares to reveal. In this video, you will experience 3 true horror stories, moments of breathless encounters with strangers and invisible ghosts right among the aisles under the cold lights of a supermarket at night. You will follow the footsteps of a mother being closely watched by a mysterious man in a red hoodie. Every step she takes in the dark supermarket, you will feel the utter loneliness of a student trapped in a night shift, forced to face an obsessive stranger. And you will witness the survival battle of a warehouse worker when darkness and shadows intertwine, creating a real nightmare. Echoing footsteps, cold eyes, and whispering voices from the shadows will keep you glued to the screen. Don't watch this if you don't want to lose sleep, because when these 3 stories end, you will forever look at supermarkets differently, through the eyes of fear and suspicion. Are you ready to step into the world of darkness? Lena, a 39-year-old mother, was used to sneaking to the supermarket late at night when the store was quiet so she could shop quickly and peacefully for her family of 3 young children. That night, she arrived at King Colon, the store near her home, just after 9 p.m., close to closing time. She carried a carefully prepared shopping list, eyes scanning each item she needed, trying not to get distracted. The supermarket was unusually silent at that hour, so much so that the clatter of the shopping cart startled Lena. The bright fluorescent lights shone directly onto the long aisles, but instead of feeling warm, everything felt cold and soulless. The smell of food mixed with plastic and tiled floors created an unpleasant atmosphere, as if everything was waiting for something abnormal to happen. Lena reached for a bag of potato chips on the shelf when suddenly a hand lightly touched her shoulder. She turned around, heart pounding. Before her stood a tall, tanned man, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a dark red hoodie. His gaze sent chills down Lena's spine, not friendly, but something half-threatening, half-haunting. "Sorry to startle you." His voice was deep and slightly hoarse. "I'm looking for the same bag of chips you have in your cart. Do you know where you got it?" Lena forced a smile and just pointed as he followed her to the bag. The man began talking about the chips, why he liked them, their ingredients, and small details that made him strange. She tried to appear busy and took slow steps backward, but he persistently stayed close. His eyes never left her, as if interrogating every thought in her head. Then, in a sudden pause, he looked Lena straight in the face and whispered coldly, "You're so beautiful." Lena felt frozen all over. She responded with a forced smile and hurriedly said she needed to finish shopping before the store closed. But the man refused to leave. He continued to follow her down each aisle, his gaze like a sharp blade cutting through the quiet air. The atmosphere around Lena became suffocating, and the sense of safety she once had vanished completely. Lena knew she was no longer alone, and tonight, the darkness inside the supermarket was more than just the absence of light. It was something haunting, lurking, waiting. Lena couldn't focus anymore. With every step she took down the aisles, the shadowy figure in the red hoodie silently followed close behind, silent yet haunting. His eyes never left her, as if he were trying to uncover something buried deep within her mind. She tried to remind herself to stay calm, telling herself to just check out quickly and go home. But the growing discomfort pressed down on her chest, making her feel suffocated in the thick, stagnant air of the empty supermarket. Suddenly, the man started talking, but not about ordinary things. He spoke of strange hobbies, peculiar foods found only in some faraway region, then asked about her personal life with a tone that was half joking, half serious. Lena just wanted to escape this bizarre conversation as fast as possible. She tried to avoid him, quickening her pace, weaving through the shelves. But he didn't give up. He followed every step, even stepping past her, breathing heavily as if trying to create a fake distance. Then he turned back, looked her straight in the eyes, and said in a trembling voice, "You are beautiful." A chill ran through her. Lena realized this was no longer a simple compliment, but a hidden warning, like a challenge. She stepped back and firmly said, "I just want to shop and go home." The man fell silent, staring at her for a long moment before walking away. But he didn't leave the supermarket. She saw him slipping between aisles, standing silently and watching her every move from afar. The feeling of being watched made Lena utterly uneasy. When she reached the checkout, the man in the red hoodie lined up right behind her. He said nothing, just stood there, his gaze hunting her like a predator. Lena hurried to pay, feeling her shoulders weighed down by that inexplicable presence. After leaving the counter, she pushed her cart quickly toward the parking lot. But then she saw him following, not behind her, but standing by an old silver Honda, the car he had arrived in when he entered the supermarket. The engine was off. He just sat there, eyes locked on her through the window, as if waiting for something. Lena's heart pounded. She quickly got into her car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As she backed out of the lot, she glanced at the rearview mirror. The Honda still sat quietly there, its headlights off. On the drive home, the dark road felt more suffocating than ever. She glanced back several times, seeing the Honda's shadow trailing closely, moving slowly, no turns, no lights on. When she reached her driveway, she hurriedly opened the door and called her husband outside. He stepped out, looked around, but saw nothing. The car had vanished, as if it had never been there. But Lena knew. The stalking wasn't over. That gaze, that breath, and the silent smile in the shadows were still out there, waiting for her in the days to come. That night, when everything seemed to have settled, Lena still couldn't sleep peacefully. The feeling of being watched clung to her like an invisible ghost, creeping into every small corner of the house. She looked out the living room window. The street light flickered faintly through the curtains, casting hazy streaks of light on the deep darkness. Suddenly, soft, cautious footsteps echoed outside. Lena lifted her head, eyes wide, trying to see better in the dark. The footsteps stopped right under the living room window where she was standing. Her heart pounded, palms sweaty and cold. She turned and called her husband with a trembling voice. "Honey, there's someone out there." He immediately stood up and went outside to check. His footsteps echoed on the yard, the flashlight beam sweeping every nook and cranny. But outside, there was only darkness and the rustling of fallen leaves. Lena sighed in relief, but hadn't settled when a sudden loud banging came at the door. She startled, panic in her eyes as she looked toward the front door. The banging came again, louder, as if trying to shatter the silent walls of the night. Her husband opened the door, looked around the empty area, and saw no one. But on the ground, right in front of the door, were wet footprints, not ordinary human feet, but deep, strange imprints of old worn shoes. A chill ran through Lena's body. "Someone has been here," she whispered. The next morning, the police were called to inspect the house and the surrounding area, but no other signs of intrusion were found except for those strange footprints. Neighborhood security cameras also didn't capture any suspicious images. In the days that followed, Lena kept receiving strange messages with no words, only bizarre symbols or meaningless strings of numbers. Sometimes she got calls at midnight. On the other end, just soft, cold sighs. She dared not report to anyone, nor tell friends or family. She knew that just a single complaint could make everything worse. Every time she went out, Lena looked around with heightened alertness. The man in the red hoodie no longer needed to appear directly. He had already planted a persistent fear deep in her mind. Then, one night, after the whole family was asleep, Lena woke to the phone ringing. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She trembled as she answered. On the other end, a hoarse voice whispered a sentence that haunted her all night. "I know your house, and I will come again." Lena knew this was no empty threat. That man, with cold eyes and an unforgettable smile, was still watching her every step. And she, an ordinary mother, had become prey in his game. A game with no end. Time passed, but Lena's obsession never faded. The man in the red hoodie no longer appeared clearly, followed her every step in the supermarket or on the street. Yet, that silence was even more terrifying. Every time Lena stepped outside, she always felt a cold gaze watching her, though she saw no figure. Slamming doors, passing cars, and echoing footsteps all became heavy, causing her panic for no clear reason. She frequently checked the security devices around the house, installed extra cameras, and locked doors carefully. But deep down, Lena knew no system could protect her from what she couldn't see. Someone who knew all her habits, every path around her home, and could appear at any moment. The strange messages and silent calls continued to come, like a cold reminder of the invisible presence lurking outside. Her husband always tried to reassure her, but his eyes could not hide the worry. They knew they couldn't confront it directly, only try to live normally amid the silent fear. Lena still went to the supermarket, but never late at night again. She avoided looking at the shelves where she had met that man. And every time she passed by the store, she still felt like a pair of eyes were watching, tracking her. Some fears never end, never disappear. They only hide in the dark, waiting for the moment to return. And for Lena, the man in the red hoodie was not just a nameless stranger in the late night. He was an immortal obsession, a ghost that could never be cast out of her life. Maggie, 20 years old, a college student working the night shift at a 24-hour Walmart, never thought that the night shift, a job she considered just a temporary experience, could turn into such a haunting night. That night, Maggie arrived at the store at midnight, starting her shift that would last until 8 a.m. The inside of the supermarket was eerily quiet, with only a few dim fluorescent lights shining down long, endless aisles. She felt a profound loneliness, as if every sound and life had been drained from the space. As Maggie began checking the shelves, she noticed that very few customers shopped at midnight. No more than 3 or 4 scattered footsteps in the vast store. Her footsteps echoed steadily, mingling with the hum of the air conditioning, creating a monotonous and cold soundtrack. Suddenly, Maggie felt like someone was watching her. She turned her head to look around but saw only empty shelves and the faint shadows of the refrigerated aisles. A chill spread across her skin, making her shiver. Not long after, she spotted a bald man lingering near the checkout counters. He said nothing, just pacing back and forth with a vague, ominous demeanor. Maggie tried to keep her distance, but his presence made the atmosphere heavy, oppressive, like an invisible cage surrounding her. Before she could understand what was happening, part of the supermarket lights flickered out, plunging Maggie into a flickering darkness, with only the faint glow from a few working refrigerators. The air grew thick, and every small noise amplified into a threatening sound. Lena stood there, heart pounding, the loneliness and fear gradually closing in. She knew this night would be a long one she would never forget. After part of the supermarket lights went out, Maggie stood silently in the flickering darkness, her heart pounding as if it would burst from her chest. Every sound around her became clearer and more terrifying than ever. The humming of the refrigeration units, distant footsteps echoing, and even steady breaths, almost like her own. She tried to continue working, but the overwhelming silence made everything feel strange. Maggie began to sense something was wrong, a feeling that someone was quietly watching her, tracking every movement, every breath. Suddenly, a noise rang out from behind the shelves, sounding like metal clashing. Maggie turned around but saw only vague darkness and towering stacks of boxes. She decided to check the back storage area, a place few visited at this hour. As she moved deeper into the storage, Maggie encountered a bald man wearing a supermarket uniform. He said nothing, silently passed by her, then disappeared into the shadows. Maggie felt uneasy, unsure if he was a co-worker or a manager, as she had never seen him before. Not long after, Maggie heard the emergency exit door creak, as if someone was trying to enter the supermarket. She hurried to check but found the door locked tight. There were no signs of forced entry or break-in, only silence and darkness. Panic started creeping in. She tried to contact the manager, but her phone in the storage had no signal. She decided to find a way out, only to discover the main exit was also locked automatically. She was trapped inside the supermarket. What scared Maggie the most were the shadowy figures appearing and disappearing along the aisles. They didn't speak or move clearly, just stood still or moved very slowly. Footsteps grew louder, steady yet heavy, creating an invisible pressure weighing down her spirit. Maggie tried to focus and hurried toward the checkout counter, where a landline phone was available to call the police. But when she called, the other end was filled with static and a chilling silence. No one answered. In the darkness, a low, hoarse voice whispered near her ear, "We're waiting for you. Don't try to run." Maggie turned, trying to make out the stranger's figure, but saw only a blurry dark shadow standing still. Her heart stopped for a moment. There was no doubt. She was trapped with someone unknown. Maggie stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The hoarse voice didn't just echo in her ears but seemed to pierce every cell, sending a cold shiver through her. Her eyes darted quickly, searching for the shadow that whispered, but all she saw were vague dark shapes lurking in the corners of the vast supermarket. She tried to stay calm, each rapid breath pushing back the fear closing in around her. Maggie stepped back, intending to find a way out, but her feet felt nailed to the cold floor. The figure began moving toward her, slow but sure steps, like a predator driven by an irresistible instinct. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, casting patchy light and shadow that made the figure appear even more eerie and distorted. Maggie knew she couldn't stand still and wait for whatever was coming. She quickly turned and ran toward the only exit, the front door. But when she reached it, the door was locked tight from the outside. She slammed her fists on it, screamed for help, but her voice only echoed back in the cold emptiness. No one answered, no sign of help. In her desperation, Maggie heard footsteps quickening, coming closer, followed by heavy, low, threatening breaths. She turned around, eyes fixed on the figure approaching. The bald man emerged more clearly from the shadows, his face expressionless, like a soulless mask, eyes deep and dark, swallowing the light. He said nothing, just raised a hand and silently stepped forward. Maggie backed toward the cold refrigerators, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand touched a small metal rod, and she gripped it with all her strength. The stranger closed in, his gaze fixed on her, as if trying to read every thought in her mind. She screamed and struck hard at his hand, forcing him to stagger back a step. Then they both plunged into a fierce struggle amid the dim light and thick darkness. Maggie kicked hard, pushed him away, then sprinted to the nearby security room to call the police. He followed closely, but the alarm ringing from the security room made him stop, and he hurriedly vanished into the darkness like a ghost. Just minutes later, the police arrived and searched the entire supermarket, but found no trace of the stranger. Maggie was still trembling, but knew she had survived a horrifying night no one could have imagined. The next day, Maggie returned to work, but she was no longer the cheerful young woman she once was. Her eyes held sadness and exhaustion, as if carrying the weight of a nightmarish night she could never forget. Though the police came and the supermarket was thoroughly inspected, the stranger was never caught. The dim security cameras failed to capture any clear images. Everything seemed wiped clean, leaving only confusion in Maggie's heart and among her co-workers. Since that night, she was never assigned a night shift again, partly out of safety concerns, partly because the stress made it impossible for her to focus. But the scariest thing wasn't the absence of the stranger. It was the obsession that could not be shaken from Maggie's mind. Every time she entered the dark corners of the supermarket, every flicker of the lights turning on and off, the feeling of being watched resurfaced. She heard distant whispers, soft footsteps in the darkness, and cold eyes staring directly at her, even when no one was around. Maggie's life was no longer peaceful. Her sleep was often disturbed by vague images, shadows, and sighs in the dead of night. She was no longer the same person. She lived in persistent fear, carrying the memory of a night filled with darkness and danger. Maggie understood clearly that some things cannot be seen with the naked eye, but are always present, waiting in the dark. And for her, that terrifying night was an unforgettable warning that sometimes darkness is not just the absence of light, but the place where life's most frightening mysteries reside. Tom is a warehouse worker at Great American Supermarket, the only place in town with a night shift. His work begins right after the store closes at 10 p.m. and lasts until 3 a.m. Tom was used to the quiet of empty streets and silent aisles, but that night, the atmosphere was heavy and different. He arrived at the store on time, opened the back door of the warehouse, and stepped into the cold space where tall stacks of boxes awaited unloading. The vast scene, lit by dim fluorescent lights, cast long shadows across the floor. The coldness spread, not just from the temperature, but from an inexplicable feeling that enveloped everything. That night, Tom had no co-workers with him. Terry, his regular work partner, was absent due to illness. Tom propped the warehouse door slightly ajar with a small doorstop, waiting for Terry to arrive. But time passed, and the door remained tightly shut. He paced back and forth, calling Terry's name, only to hear empty echoes in response. Something strange happened when he noticed the doorstop was no longer in its place. Instead, it lay just outside the door, as if someone had pushed it out. Tom's heart raced, and a feeling of unease began to rise. As Tom turned back into the warehouse, he suddenly sensed an invisible gaze watching him. The shadows in the corners of the warehouse seemed more than mere darkness. Something was lurking, moving silently. He called Terry on the phone and heard a weak reply through the line. "I can't make it." But when Tom looked back at the warehouse door, it had slammed shut, and he knew he was no longer alone in the supermarket. After the warehouse door suddenly slammed shut, Tom stood frozen in the cold space, the dim fluorescent lights flickering continuously as if warning that something was about to happen. He heard a heavy sigh echo from a dark corner, making every pore on his skin contract. Tom tried to regain his composure, taking slow, cautious steps into the warehouse, his eyes constantly scanning for the source of the sound. Everything was silent except for the humming of the cooling system and the faint wind passing through a small gap above the door. Then from the far end of the warehouse, a strange noise arose. The clanging of metal, as if someone was pushing boxes or prying something open. He called Terry's name again, but only received silence in response. No one answered. Tom took out his phone, but there was no signal. He knew he was trapped in an unfriendly space. As he moved toward the back exit door, he found it locked tight, even though he had previously propped it open with a doorstop. The darkness inside the warehouse had become thick, each shadowy corner like a deep abyss that seemed to swallow the flashlight beam. Suddenly, the shadow of a man appeared swiftly beside him. Tom startled and turned, seeing only a tall man with a blurred face and cold, emotionless eyes. The man wore a supermarket uniform but said nothing, staring at Tom as if trying to pierce his mind. Tom stepped back, heart pounding. The mysterious man slowly approached, his footsteps echoing through the warehouse floor. Tom searched for anything to defend himself, and his hand touched a metal rod lying next to a pile of cartons. Sounds began erupting everywhere, doors slamming, metal clashing, rapid breaths coming from an unknown source. Tom realized he was no longer alone. A stranger had broken in, and his purpose was not robbery or vandalism. Tom stood in the vast warehouse, his heavy breaths echoing in the cold space. The darkness was thick, swallowing the flashlight beam in his hand. Heavy, steady breathing came from behind, making his heart feel like it would burst from his chest. Suddenly, from the shadows, a tall figure silently appeared. His face was hidden under a cap, eyes deep and glowing red like cold flames, the flashlight's beam only adding to his eerie aura. He said nothing, stepping closer with slow but certain steps, like a predator driven by instinct. Tom gripped the metal rod tightly, his mind a chaotic mix of fear and determination. The man lunged forward. Tom blocked the punch with the rod, and the two plunged into a fierce struggle amid the flickering light and dense darkness. The sounds of collision echoed, punches and dodges creating a terrifying rhythm in the vast space. Tom fought with all his strength to push him back, but the stranger's unnatural strength forced him several steps backward. Suddenly, the warehouse lights snapped on fully, and a piercing alarm blared. The stranger stopped, his eyes flashing with anger. But the shrill alarm forced him to retreat, vanishing into the darkness like a ghost. Tom gasped for breath, drenched in cold sweat. Minutes later, police arrived and searched the entire supermarket. They found no trace of the stranger, only some disturbed boxes and faint footprints on the floor. Though temporarily safe, Tom knew he could never forget the image of that mysterious man, a shadow not belonging to this world, an invisible predator in the dark. Maggie, another night shift co-worker, also never forgot that night when she heard silent footsteps in the warehouse and a cold voice whisper near her ear, "We're waiting for you." In the nights that followed, flickering fluorescent lights and strange footsteps echoed, haunting memories that lingered in their minds. A terrifying night no one at the supermarket wanted to recall. After that terrifying night, Tom never looked at the great American supermarket the same way again. He often stayed awake through the night, hearing footsteps echoing in his mind, even though there was only absolute silence around him. Every time the fluorescent lights in the warehouse flickered unevenly or an unexpected knocking sounded, his heart tightened, reminding him of the mysterious man whose face he never fully saw. Other co-workers also began experiencing strange occurrences, sighs in the night, fleeting shadows appearing and disappearing in the hallways, or objects mysteriously moving without reason. Tom tried to quit the night shift, but the obsession wouldn't let him find peace. He knew something still lurked in the supermarket's darkness. Something not of this world, always lurking and waiting. Sometimes he heard strange whispers, gentle calls of his name echoing through the cold space, making it impossible to shake the feeling of being watched. The supermarket was no longer just a place to shop and work. It had become a stage for invisible ghosts, a place holding secrets no one dared to confront. And for Tom, that Shadow the bald man with soulless eyes, would always be a part of his life, a wound in his soul that would never heal, because in that darkness, not everyone could escape. The three terrifying stories you've just heard are not merely simple experiences in supermarkets at night. They are deep hauntings, moments confronting darkness and the inexplicable. They make us look back at the world around us with suspicion and caution. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, alone in the dark, among cold aisles and flickering lights? Or felt the presence of someone, unseen, yet unmistakably clear in every step, every breath? If so, don't hesitate to share your story in the comments below. I'm eager to listen and explore with you those mysterious, chilling experiences that few dare to speak about. If you found this video thrilling and eerie, please give it a like to support me. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be the first to experience more true-to-life, vivid horror stories that I'll continue sharing. Thank you for patiently watching until the very end. Your companionship is my motivation to keep bringing you captivating and haunting experiences, helping you explore the world that we sometimes see only through darkness. See you in the next videos, where every shadow has a story, and every story can change the way you see the world forever.